Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Back on Illinois Rising, Joe Kaiser and Mark Cavers filling in today for Dan Proft. And we were just talking to State Representative Alan Skillicorn, a reform-minded legislator from McHenry County, about what the next General Assembly holds and what Republicans, even though in the super minority, can do to stand their ground and push forward some reform-minded positions. There are some incoming Republican lawmakers that do bring a lot of promise in passing reform-minded legislation and opposing tax increases. One of them is Blaine Wilhour, who's a Republican from the Effingham area, downstate Illinois. And he recently penned an op-ed in the Effingham Daily News, which was right on the money on a lot of the issues that we talk about on this show. We were just talking about with Alan Skillicorn about how Illinois is obviously in dire straits, but there are a lot of things that we can do. And I think the biggest issue for lawmakers like Blaine or like Alan or like Tom Morrison, some of these other reform-minded legislators, Mark Batnick, is how to do that while operating in a General Assembly that is controlled by Democrats and has Governor-elect Pritzker at the other end to sign bills into law. That's, I think, the biggest hurdle for reform-minded legislators.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And like you said, there's a number of people who have real-life experience running businesses, serving in the military, raising a family, and who have overcome challenges, far greater than those that could be presented by Mike Madigan and some Chicago Democrats who have been in charge of state government for 40 years. So that gives me hope. Right.
Yeah. These are just fresh voices that can hopefully come to the forefront. And for more on that, we are joined right now by Blaine Wilhour, Republican incoming state rep from the Effingham area. Blaine, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it's good to be here, Joe. Mark, appreciate the opportunity.
So let's start. I mean, you've outlined a lot of the policy proposals that you are advocating for. What are you looking forward to most? I mean, maybe it's a perverse way of saying it because there's going to be a lot of struggles once the new General Assembly convenes, but what are you looking forward to most once you get there in January?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to, going there and building relationships and, making sure that we find a way that Southern Illinois and the reform agenda has a voice in Springfield. I mean, pretty clear that the Republican Party got smacked down in November, especially in the suburbs, and there's various reasons that happened. But the biggest thing that we have control over is our message and our legislative agenda. And in my mind, the party as a whole has done a poor job of messaging on issues that matter to people. Mike Madigan sucks is not a message. Everybody knows that, and most Democrats will even tell you that in private, but that doesn't give anyone a compelling reason to vote for us, We have traditionally we're a party of ideas. Let's articulate them and give people a compelling reason to vote for us,
Hey, Blaine, this is Mark Cavers, and I know we'll get to some of the policy things that you believe in and have presented in that op-ed and other places, but just quickly, because you brought it up, you and a handful of other Republicans in your area were successful in November at a time when a lot of other Republicans across the state weren't. And so, what lessons can Republicans across the state, Republicans in suburbs, take from, the model and the approach that you took that got you through a competitive primary and got you elected in November?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing, Mark, is I didn't sugarcoat the issues. We've got big problems in Illinois, and they require big solutions with a broad vision. So we ran on conservative policies, fiscal responsibility, traditional values, putting the public servant back in public service, eliminating career politicians. And we dealt with, or at least in my campaign, we were very out front on public sector pensions. We're not going to be able to do anything about property taxes and properly funding education and infrastructure and transportation care for our most vulnerable until we address these major cost drivers. And traditionally, people in Southern Illinois have been afraid to tackle those issues because the public sector is very strong, and they're the ones that control all the money down here. But I think when you drill down on that a little bit, people get it. They can see the state's in an untenable situation, that our local governments are in an untenable situation, and they're looking for solutions. They're not looking for politicians sugarcoating issues. We've had enough of that, and it's not working. That's clear. So just be strong on your message, be bold on your message. Everything that works down here is not going to work up there. I realize that, and I have what I call kitchen table priorities that I ran on, and that I think would translate well across the political spectrum. And it's and I can certainly outline those for you if you would like me to. But that's what we got to do. We've got to have a message. We've got to give people a compelling reason to vote for us. The Democrats are going to give us plenty of ammunition, I think, here to where we can stand up and be strong on some things, and that's what people are looking for.
And so you talk about in your op-ed, the blueprint for success in Illinois, and you talked about the problems we face, whether it be workers' comp, pension reform, property taxes, with kind of the breadth of issues that Illinois faces. Where do you start when you get down there next month?
Yeah. Like I just alluded to, I've put together, I ran on four things in my campaign, and I think that they translate well. I call them kitchen table priorities, things that cut across the political spectrum that I think could get some bipartisan support with the right messaging. Number one thing is a balanced budget. Everybody wants that. Let's get back to being the party of fiscal responsibility. Even Governor-elect Pritzker, he stated that he supports a real balanced budget, and he acknowledges that we haven't had one since the early 2000s. So if he's serious about that, then I'm ready to work with him on it. And if he's not, then we're going to hold his feet to the fire on it. But we need to take the balanced budget one step further. I believe strongly that we need to institute a strong spending cap that ties the growth rate of government to like a 10-year rolling average on the actual growth of the economy. Politicians since the beginning of time have promised they're going to control spending, but they can't do it. They've proven that, and I think this is the only way that we can have long-term assurances that the politicians don't overspend, and it also brings them to the table and makes them become intentional about spending priorities. So that's the number one thing, a balanced budget. I think that's an 80-20 issue. Jobs and economic growth, we've got to be pushing that every time we talk. No amount of new taxes is going to get us out of the mess that we're in. We've got to grow the economy and be more competitive, and that means dealing with the serious structural issues that nobody deals with in Illinois. Workers' comp, property taxes, and pensions are three big ones there. And education. We allow the Democrat Party to get the mantle for being the champions of education funding. But if you drill down and really look at the issue, what they're really champions of is education pension funding. Let's dispel the myths on education funding. Illinois spends upwards of 40% more per pupil on education than the states that surround us. I think we're somewhere around 13th in the nation in per pupil funding for education, but everybody's constantly pushing the narrative that we underfund education, which is not necessarily true. I think the problem is that 50% or so of all of our state-level funding for education goes straight to the pensions and not to the classroom.
Blaine,
So until we deal with those kind of things, then we're not going to be able to fund education properly.
And Blaine, I think we see, we just had yesterday the new census data come out saying that we're the second worst state in outmigration. So we're seeing the impact of the failure to pursue policies like the ones you've just outlined. What do you see in your perspective? From your perspective, are you seeing people leaving? What's driving people out? Give us some color of how you see that locally.
Yeah, outmigration is the most pressing issue of our times. and there's a lot of reasons to drive it, and we can argue about it all day long. I personally believe it's mostly due to high taxation, especially when it comes to property taxes, and lack of opportunity, especially in our part of the state. I hear a lot about this. Anytime I put anything on social media or any of those platforms about this, you constantly get comments. I'm leaving. 6 years. I'm leaving when I get. When my kid gets out of school. I'm leaving. The numbers don't lie. We're losing citizens at an alarming rate. And so now we're stuck here in a position where we have, increasing taxes. They're wanting to increase taxes around every corner. We have, a debt situation that's completely out of control with no end in sight, and a shrinking population. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to deduce that this isn't going to end well for the state of Illinois.
Right. I was just going to add to that, Blaine, that you said earlier. There are issues that your constituents understand. They understand the problems that Illinois is facing, but lawmakers oftentimes don't. There's a disconnect there that lawmakers, career politicians, don't understand the issues that everyday taxpayers have, and all these for sale signs popping up in neighborhoods has got to be at the top of that list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the reason on that is there's not a whole lot of accountability for these politicians, and there hasn't been a whole lot of people step up and try to actually run on the issues. That's a big problem that we have, and voter apathy is a big problem too. It always has been, So we've tried to be very intentional about laying out a very specific message. I said during the campaign that if we don't run strong on the issues, and we have no credibility to govern strongly on the issues.
Absolutely. He's Blaine Wilhour. He's an incoming state representative from downstate Illinois, Effingham area. Blaine, thanks so much for joining us. Merry Christmas, and good luck next month going to Springfield.
I really appreciate it. Merry Christmas to you guys as well. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, take care.